Title: The Miserable Life of a Medieval Peasant. Imagine waking up each morning on a bed of straw, your body aching from yesterday's labor, your hands blistered and cracked. There's no comfort, no warmth, only the bitter cold of a damp wooden hut. This was the daily reality for the vast majority of people. During the Middle Ages, the peasants. While lords and kings filled the pages of history books, peasants were the forgotten backbone of medieval society. They toiled in the fields from sunrise to sunset. Their lives marked by hunger, disease, and backbreaking work. But how miserable was the life of a medieval peasant, really? In this episode of Dark Age Archives, we'll pull back the veil on the grim, unromanticized reality of medieval rural life. Most peasants were born into poverty, and they died in it too. They were typically serfs, bound to the land and to the lord who owned it. From the moment they could walk, children were put to work. By age 12, many were already considered adults, expected to contribute fully to the family's survival. Peasant families lived in cramped one-room homes with no insulation. The floor was dirt, the roof thatched. Livestock often shared the space during harsh winters, not for comfort, but because the animal's body heat helped prevent freezing to death. The air inside was smoky from open fires and foul from waste and rotting straw. There was little privacy, and lice and fleas were constant companions. A peasant's life revolved entirely around the seasons. Spring meant planting, summer meant tending crops, autumn meant harvest, and winter meant survival. Every season brought new challenges and new chances to fail. A late frost could destroy an entire planting. Heavy rains could flood the fields. A hot, dry summer could bake the crops too. Dust. Every task was grueling. Plowing fields with wooden tools, often pulled by oxen or even the peasants themselves. Hand-harvesting wheat with sickles. Carrying water from distant wells. Chopping firewood in freezing temperatures. Making repairs to homes, fences, carts, tools. Days started before the sun rose and ended well after it set. There were no weekends, no vacations, only the Sabbath, and even then, rest was minimal. Women's labor was just as intense, though often overlooked. They tended the home, raised the children, spun wool, wove cloth, cooked every meal, and helped in the fields. If a husband died, the widow had to take on all his work as well, or remarry quickly to survive. Hunger was a constant companion. Most meals consisted of bread, porridge, onions, and the occasional egg or cabbage. Meat was a luxury, usually reserved for holy days, if at all. Malnutrition was widespread. Rickets, scurvy, and other diet-related conditions were common. During famines, people were known to eat bark, grass, or even boiled animal hides. Medical knowledge was primitive, and hygiene was almost non-existent. People rarely bathed, as water was often contaminated and considered dangerous. Lice, fleas, and rats were constant nuisances. Latrines were shallow pits, often near wells or homes. Disease spread rapidly. Life expectancy hovered around 30 to 35 years. Infant mortality was staggering. Some estimates suggest 1 in 3 children died before the age of 5. Women often died in childbirth. A simple cut could turn into a deadly infection. And if you were lucky enough to survive those risks, you still had to worry about famine, crop failure, and war. Speaking of war, peasants were not spared its horrors. Though they rarely fought, they bore the brunt of raiding armies, who burned crops, destroyed homes, and stole livestock, Lords could conscript peasants for labor or levy additional taxes to fund their military campaigns. Some peasants were even forced to serve in militias. The church loomed large in peasant life. It dictated moral behavior, reinforced social hierarchy, and extracted tithes, 10% of a peasant's already meager income. Religion was both a comfort and a tool of control. Heaven was promised, but only if you obeyed. Hell was real, vivid, terrifying, and used to keep the poor in line. Despite this, the church was often the only source of education or aid. Monks offered basic medical care, copied texts, and provided spiritual counsel. Religious festivals were some of the few joys peasants experienced, offering music, food, and a brief respite from daily hardship. Feudalism was brutally rigid. Peasants owed labor, taxes, and loyalty to their lords. In return, they received little protection and almost no rights. Lords could demand work, take a share of the harvest, and impose fines or punishment at will. Disputes were often settled not by fairness, but by the whim of those in power. Yet peasants weren't always passive. History records numerous revolts, like the English Peasants' Revolt of 1381, where the poor rose up against crushing injustice. These uprisings were rare, but they were powerful reminders that even the lowest classes could fight back. Some even gained temporary freedoms or concessions, though most were swiftly and brutally suppressed. Despite the misery, peasants built families, told stories, shared meals, laughed, prayed, and loved. They formed tight-knit communities that relied on each other for survival. Oral traditions kept local legends alive. Songs and dances passed from one generation to the next. Life was bleak, but not without humanity. So, how miserable was the life of a medieval peasant? It was brutal, unforgiving, and often hopeless. Yet somehow they endured. They survived generation after generation, clinging to life with a quiet resilience that history rarely honors. They weren't knights or kings. They didn't write the chronicles. But without them, there would have been no castles, no conquests, and no kingdoms to remember. This has been Dark Age Archives. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the harsh reality of medieval life, subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten corners of history. 3 times a week, we uncover the truths others leave buried.